Arthur is a tyrannical king who rules over the world with an iron fist. During his ascent to the throne, Arthur slaughtered his enemies, nuked cities, and committed countless atrocities, all in the name of power. But one day, he reflects on all the things he has done, he is overcome with a sense of guilt, and in the next moment, he dies of a heart attack. As he is slowly descending into the abyss, a voice calls out to him and says it will give him a second chance at life, so he had better not mess it up this time. A few moments later, Arthur opens his eyes and finds two people looking down at him. The man says his name is Reynolds, and he is Arthur's father, while Alice over here is his mother. They don't really expect their newborn baby to understand what they are saying, but they are so excited to have him. Arthur slowly comes to the realization that these people really are his parents, and he was just born a minute ago. He is still finding it hard to believe that he is a baby again, but he can't deny that his parents are really good at taking care of him. Overall, he is pretty happy, but he still doesn't like the fact that he is stuck in a baby body. He's got an oversized head, he can't speak, and every couple of hours he shits his diaper involuntarily, so he has lost all control. But then he notices something that is even stranger than his current circumstance. He watches as Reynolds channels energy into his fists, and proceeds to smash a boulder to pieces. Arthur is amazed because this is a power that he knows nothing about despite all of his years as the ruler of the world. This feat is apparently quite impressive. So Reynolds is proud of himself and turns to his family so they can praise him, but he fails to pay attention to his surroundings, so a rock falls straight into his head. Alice was worried something like this might happen. So she then goes over to him and starts using magic to heal Reynolds' injury, but she warns him to be more careful next time he wants to show off. Reynolds may have just been trying to show off, but when he gets serious, those fists are no joke because he can easily one-shot a wild boar when he goes out hunting. And having him around makes things a lot easier for his party members. By the time the hunting trip is over, Reynolds returns to his family, and is ready for a welcome back hug. But then he remembers that he is still covered in boar blood, so he's going to have to get cleaned up first. Arthur has learned two things from seeing this. 1. This world is so dangerous that it is common for people to own weapons for their protection. And 2. He's going to have to learn how to fight if he wants to live freely in this world. Now that Reynolds is back, Alice says it's time to put Arthur down for a nap, and normally he'd be upset about being treated like a baby, but this is one part he actually enjoys. Back in his previous life, he rarely ever got the chance to sleep peacefully because people would always try to assassinate him when he least expected it. Of course, he could easily defeat any attackers that came after him, but it was incredibly stressful. Months pass, and Arthur's baby limbs are finally strong enough to allow him to move around on his own now. The first thing he does with his new mobility is go over to a mirror so he can take a long, hard look at himself. His parents think it's cute that Arthur is so mesmerized by his reflection, but he is just coming to terms with the fact that he really is a baby. Anyway, since Arthur can move on his own now, when Alice puts him down for a nap later that day, he sets his plan into motion. As soon as she leaves the room, he opens his eyes and throws his blanket out of the crib so he can climb down and escape his crib. He then proceeds to crawl across the floor while Alice is busy doing the dishes, and she must be really focused on those dishes because Arthur makes it all the way to the other side of the room without her noticing. Once he gets there, he opens the door to the house's library and pulls out a book because he needs to learn more about this world. After reading one of the books, he learns that this continent is called Dicathan, and it is divided into 3 kingdoms. The Darv Kingdom, a nation of dwarves that live in vast cave cities. The Elamor Kingdom, a nation of elves who live deep within the forest, and the Sapin Kingdom, a kingdom of humans ruled by a king, although here no one ever nuked the cities to take over. Arthur still wants to learn more, so he pulls out another book, and it gives him some much-needed answers. Arthur had noticed that the level of technology in this world is lacking, and the reason for that is the presence of magic. People are able to use magic by manipulating the mana within their bodies, and while it's not exactly common, magic is a huge part of life in this world. People can use magic in 2 ways, namely augmentation and conjuring. Augmentation involves circulating mana within your body, granting the user incredible strength, defense, and agility, while conjurers can project their mana outwards and use it to control any phenomenon they desire. That pretty much sums up the info about this world's magic system, but Arthur doesn't find anything about the healing magic Alice used earlier, so he assumes she must be an exception of some sort. From what Arthur can tell, most people manifest their mana when they hit puberty, and by channeling that mana through something called the mana core, one can learn to control it and become a mage. This is easy for Arthur to understand because in his previous life, he rose to power thanks to the innate power of ki within him. It functioned the exact same way as mana, so he tries focusing all of his energy to see if he can generate a reaction, and sure enough, his mana core begins to develop. This is a huge step forward in Arthur's development. Before he can do any more training, Alice finally finds him. She's been worried sick ever since she found out he wasn't in his crib, so she's glad he wasn't hurt. But while she's holding him up, she notices that something is different about him. Arthur is she might have sensed the mana within him, but she actually just noticed that Arthur pooped himself again. 2 years go by, and Alice is writing in her journal one day. She is so grateful that Arthur is growing up strong and healthy, But she's starting to grow a little concerned because she hasn't seen Arthur smile even once since he was born. Just then, she notices Reynolds and Arthur outside, and it looks like Reynolds is giving Arthur some sword lessons. Arthur seems pretty interested, but Alice is furious that Reynolds would let a 2-year-old swing a dangerous stick around. By now, Arthur has realized that Alice isn't someone you want to get angry, so he's going to have to be careful not to make her mad. To avoid any other dangerous activities, Alice decides to take Arthur out for the day to show him around the town, and Arthur is particularly excited about this because it will give him a chance to gather valuable first-hand information about this world. He can discern the level of this nation's technology by looking at the weapons that are sold to the general public, and he also gets to see various substances that he has never encountered before. Best of all, he got to witness a mage casting fire magic up close, so overall, today's trip proved to be incredibly valuable for him. By the end of the day, Arthur's baby body is exhausted from all the activity, so he is struggling to stay awake, and Alice wants to put him down for a nap as soon as they get home. As limiting as this new life has been, Arthur has come to enjoy life with loving parents. In his past life, Arthur got dropped off at spawn with no starter kit, so he was forced to live his childhood in an orphanage, and never got to experience parental love, so this is a nice change of pace for him. Arthur soon falls asleep on Alice's shoulder, so she starts carrying him to his crib, and along the way, she tells him how proud she is of him for learning so much. She has noticed all the times he sneaks out of his bed to read books, and she saw how excited he was to see the outside world, so she is sure he has an adventurous spirit. She assumes he must have gotten that from Reynolds, and sooner or later, Arthur is bound to want to leave home to see the world on his own. Personally, she would prefer it if Arthur lived a peaceful life here, but as long as he is happy, she will support him no matter what. The next day, Arthur is standing by the window and watches as Reynolds begins practicing in the front yard. He is interested in seeing the applications of magic up close and personal again, so he eagerly watches as Reynolds begins circulating mana within his body. Eventually, rocks begin to fly up from the ground, and Reynolds makes it seem like it is the greatest thing in the world, but in reality, it is pretty pitiful. This is the limit of Reynolds' skill when it comes to conjuring, but that's because Reynolds' specialty is augmentation, so his magic is much more efficient when he sticks to using it within his body. Seeing his father's power motivates Arthur to go do some training, but just when he's about to climb down from the table, Alice tells him it's time for his nap. Arthur still can't speak yet, so he starts whining as they pass the bookshelf, but Alice tells him he needs to take a nap, so there's no time for books right now. Normally, there would be nothing Arthur could do about this, but he recently learned a legendary technique, pouting. Arthur has mastered the art of weaponizing his cuteness as a baby, so even though Alice still wants to put him down for a nap, she eventually relents, and just lets him read his book. Once Arthur is alone, he begins practicing with his mana core, and over the past 2 years, he has managed to get pretty good at it. By gathering various fragments of mana within his body, he was able to generate a mana core within himself, and although it was incredibly strenuous, it was well worth it. Now, with just a little more effort, he should be able to cast his first spell, but Arthur drastically underestimates the strength of his mana and accidentally blows up the house. Alice and Reynolds were outside when the explosion happened, and it was so huge that Reynolds' back gets burnt up really bad, but he and Alice are otherwise alright. However, they soon realize that Arthur was still in the house when it blew up, so they rush inside to check if he's still alive. There's no way a baby could have survived an explosion of that magnitude, but when Reynolds reaches the library, he is shocked to find that not only is Arthur completely unharmed, he was also the source of the explosion. He is barely 3 years old, so it shouldn't have been possible for him to use magic until he was at least 12, yet Arthur is already practically a master of mana. He stands proudly and looks at his parents. But he forgets that the house is falling apart, so when 2 roof beams fall straight towards him, he is completely caught off guard. He tries running away, but his stubby baby legs fail him, so it looks like he's done for. Fortunately, both Alice and Reynolds rush in to save him, and while Alice shields him with her body, Reynolds uses his magic to block all of the debris and save them both. Arthur is a bit shocked since this is the first time anyone has ever risked their life to save him, but Alice is so relieved that he is alright that she starts crying. Arthur still isn't used to having people care about him like this, so seeing her cry makes him cry as well. He never could have done something like this in his old life because he was expected to be a ruthless king. At one point, a man tried to assassinate Arthur, so after he was caught, the entire council assembled and prepared to sentence him for his crimes. And on top of that, they plan to ship the man's wife and son off to a camp that has never heard of the Geneva Convention, so they are doomed to be tortured and experimented on, because why not? The man begins to beg Arthur to spare his family because they don't deserve to suffer for what he did. And as an act of mercy, Arthur decided to kill him on the spot. That was basically an average Monday for him back then, but now he spends his Monday training with his father. Reynolds wants Arthur to try practicing with gauntlets, but Arthur already has a lifetime of sword experience, so he's not switching his main weapon. Since Arthur is so insistent on using a sword, Reynolds decides to use one as well, and to make things a little more interesting, he's going to reinforce his sword with mana. However, to his utter shock, Arthur does the exact same thing and cuts through Reynolds' sword with ease. After seeing this, Reynolds realized that Arthur is way too talented for him to train, so he is thinking of getting a professional teacher for him, and goes inside to talk to Alice about it. Alice flat out says no to the idea because she can't stand the thought of sending Arthur to some random town just so he can learn. They had already talked about this, and Reynold was supposed to teach Arthur to fight while she would teach him about magic. But Reynold points out that Arthur managed to cut right through his sword during practice even though it was infused with mana, and the kid is still a toddler for God's sake. If he's doing stuff like this at such a young age, then who knows what he could be capable of in the future, so Reynold thinks it's important for him to have a proper teacher. Alice can't deny that Arthur is unnaturally talented, but she still hates the idea of leaving him alone at a school in the city, so she and Reynold start arguing over it for a few minutes because they can't come to an agreement. Arthur is getting sick of all the arguing, so he points out that they can just come with him to the city, that way he can still get a teacher, and his parents won't have to leave him alone. The two of them hadn't realized that was an option, but it solves all their problems, so they think it's a great idea, so they immediately start making preparations for the journey, and the next day, a carriage arrives to take them to the city. They will be traveling with some of their old friends, and Arthur recognizes them because they are the ones who helped Alice and Reynold rebuild the house after he blew it up. They are all in a party called Twin Horns, and the leader, Adam, introduces himself to Arthur. Angela introduces herself as well while simultaneously introducing Arthur to her chest and nearly choking him out, and Alice is happily watching it happen. Luckily, before Arthur passes out, Durden gets him away from Angela and introduces himself as well, but he is a bit more gentle and just gives Arthur a high five. Arthur then notices a girl standing on top of the carriage, and you know she's trying to or a farm because there's no reason to be standing on the carriage right now. She doesn't say anything, so the others tell Arthur that her name is Jasmine, and the final member of the team is Helen, the archer. Since the introductions are finally done, the group needs to get moving, so they all climb into the carts and head out. Along the way, Alice asks Arthur if he is excited about his first big trip, and Arthur says yes, but internally he is thinking about how primitive this world is. They still use horse-drawn carriages to travel here, while in Arthur's old world, he had an entire fleet of flying cars he could use at any time. After traveling for most of the day, the group decides to take a break for lunch, so they set up camp, but as soon as they stop, they are attacked by wolves. Although these wolves are pretty dumb, because they didn't even try to surround the group, they just charged straight in and got bodies by the team of adventurers in an instant. Arthur finds the whole display interesting since this is the first time he has seen real combat in this world, and he intends to become strong enough to handle threats like that on his own soon. Since they got a lot of dead wolf meat now, the group decides to cook it for dinner tonight, but they got no spices, so it's just going to be plain grilled meat. Just then, Alice notices that Reynolds' arm is slightly injured, so she offers to heal it for him, but before she does, Jasmine tells her to wait a moment. All the others gather around Alice to keep a lookout because healers like her are incredibly rare in this world, so if someone were to see her using healing magic, then she could end up being targeted for it. Once Alice is done healing Reynolds, everyone goes back to what they were doing before, but Adam decides he wants to get a little exercise before he goes to bed, and there's no better way to do that than by fighting a 4-year-old. Seems like a jerk move, but Adam has heard about how strong Arthur is, and he just wants to see for himself, so this is just a practice match. Adam tells Arthur to get ready, and he has already imbued his spear with mana, so Arthur does the same. As the match begins, Arthur channels some magic into his feet, so just as he is about to clash with Adam, he vanishes and reappears behind him. This would have been the perfect chance for Arthur to strike, but his stubby toddler feet slip on the ground, so he loses his footing and Adam gets a chance to recover. Arthur and Adam then begin clashing, but I'm pretty sure the animation budget must have had negative values. Anyway, Arthur gets knocked back since his toddler body is too light to keep up with a seasoned adventurer, so he gets knocked into the air. Luckily, the others save him before he hits the ground, and they all start yelling at Adam for nearly hurting Arthur, but Adam says he couldn't help it because Arthur was too strong for him to hold back. There's no way a toddler should be capable of such strength, so he thinks Reynolds must have been giving him some kind of super soldier training, but in reality, he never actually taught Arthur to do any of this stuff, he just learned it on his own. Just then, Jasmine walks up to Arthur and startles him by accident. She was really impressed by Arthur's fight, so she asks him to teach her how to do that thing with the magic in his feet. Arthur was hoping to keep his technique secret, since it is something he mastered in his past life, but she's not taking no for an answer, and from the look in her eyes she's going to pester him relentlessly until he caves, so he may have to teach her eventually. The next morning, the journey continues as planned, and along the way, they take a few breaks to relax. During these breaks, Adam gives Arthur a few basic spearman lessons, and Helen teaches him how to use a bow a few minutes after that. And with a few basic lessons, he is able to figure it out pretty quickly. The only weapon knowledge Arthur has from his past life is with a sword, so these lessons are really valuable to him. And since he is learning so much from them, he decides to teach Jasmine his technique after all. By channeling magic into your feet and using wind magic at the same time, you are able to boost your speed tremendously. And after demonstrating it once, Jasmine is able to replicate it perfectly. Later on, Arthur is reading a magic book in the carriage, but for some reason, Jasmine is sitting there too and just staring at him. And it's not a coincidence either because she keeps taking every chance she can get to get close to Arthur. The next morning, Jasmine gives Arthur a knife as thanks for teaching her that technique, and it's clear that she really likes Arthur since she usually doesn't interact with people intentionally. A few minutes later, everyone gets back into the carriages, and they continue through the journey. But as Arthur is reading his book, the carriage is suddenly attacked by bandits. They are being attacked by bandits, and the carriage is completely surrounded, so there's nowhere for them to go. The bandit leader orders his men to capture the women and children so they can be sold as slaves, so all the bandits rush in, and the adventurers do their best to hold them off. In terms of raw power, the twin horns and Reynold are much stronger than the individual bandits, but there are way too many for them to defeat on their own, so sooner or later they are going to get overwhelmed. At one point, Reynold gets launched into the carriage by the hurt, so Alice wants to come to heal him. However, Reynold tells her to stay away, because if the bandits find out about her power, they will start targeting her, so instead, he asks Arthur to take Alice and run as far away as he can. Arthur doesn't want to leave Reynold behind, but Reynold tells him that Alice is pregnant with another child, so protecting her should be a top priority. Arthur understands when Reynold gives the signal, he prepares his magic to flee with Alice, and in the meantime, Reynold says he holds the bandits off. The bandit leader orders his men to go after Arthur and Alice, but Reynold refuses to let that happen, so he charges in and clashes with him. The bandit leader managed to knock Reynold down before, but this time, Reynold's family is on the line, so he's not going down easily. While Reynold is keeping the bandit leader busy, a few of the more insignificant bandits try to go after Arthur and Alice instead, but Adam and Jasmine throw some daggers at them and take them out to clear a path for Arthur to escape with Alice. They are all doing their best to keep the bandits away from Arthur, and he is doing his best to get Alice to safety. It's honestly ironic how he spent his previous life taking things with no regard for others, and now he is forced to run away in order to avoid losing someone precious to him. After running away for several minutes, Arthur thinks they should be far enough from the bandits to be safe now, but he was wrong. One bandit is watching them from atop a cliff, and this one is capable of using magic, so he attacks Arthur and Alice with the wind spell. Arthur doesn't notice him at first, and by the time he does, the spell has already been cast, so the only thing Arthur can do is push Alice out of the way and take the hit alone. The wind blast knocks Arthur back, so he is going to fall off the cliff, and with his toddler body, that's basically a death sentence. However, if he's going to die, he's not going out alone, so as he is falling off the cliff, he takes the knife he got from Jasmine and throws it at the magic bandit. The knife hits the bandit, and the string wraps around his ankle, so Arthur is able to use it to pull the guy down with him. The adventurers tried to use their magic to save Arthur, but he has already fallen too far for them to reach him, so Arthur is doomed. As he falls to his inevitable death, Arthur looks back on his life, and even though he is going to die, he is filled with a strange sense of peace because he knows he managed to protect his precious family. He finally understands why that man in his past life was so desperate to protect his family. Arthur didn't even think twice about sacrificing himself to save Alice, and while he doesn't regret his actions at all, he still wishes he could have survived to live with them a little longer. We see at night that he did survive the fall. Gasping for breath, bruised and dazed, Arthur opens his eyes and finds himself face to face with an enormous, terrifying beast calling him by his name. And just like that, a new nightmare is only getting started. Arthur freaks out when he sees the creature looming over him. He has no damn clue where he is, and with the way that thing's staring him down, it feels like his life is on the line. So, thinking it might be his only shot, he tries to sneak in a surprise attack, but the monster casually swats him out of the air like a fly and tells him to chill. Says it's not some evil beast and just wants to be friends. But let's be real, last time a stranger pulled the Let's Be Friends card, someone ended up in the back of a van. So, let's just say Arthur's trust levels aren't exactly high. Anyway, the kid's still a mess because his body's beaten up bad and he's not getting better unless he eats something. So, the creature casually plucks a bunch of fruit growing from the cave walls and tells him to eat up, but he hesitated. Wall fruit didn't exactly scream safe to eat, and he was already suspicious. So, Arthur tried to get up and talk his way out of the situation, but the second he moved, a sharp snap echoed from his body. So, he collapsed back to the ground, overwhelmed with pain, and just started crying. The monster just sighs and tells him to quit whining. Honestly, it's a miracle he even survived that mountain drop. Arthur wanted to ask questions, but the creature made it clear it wasn't answering anything until he ate. So, with no better option, Arthur grabs one of the fruits and takes a bite, and to his surprise it was actually pretty good that he wolfing down handfuls like they were candy. And once he's full, he turned back to the creature and asked if it knew anything about his parents, or what happened after the attack. The creature explained that it couldn't leave the cave, but it had a special ability to observe the outside world. To prove it, it projected a screen in front of Arthur, showing him that his parents had defeated the bandits and left several days ago. So, Arthur's eyes welled up again, but this time from relief that his parents were alive. He thanks the creature for showing him, and since he was going to be stuck here recovering for a while, he decided to stop being so hostile. The creature introduced itself as Sylvia, and despite how terrifying she looked, she turned out to be gentle and kind. Then over the next few days, Arthur remained in the cave eating and resting while his body slowly healed. Sylvia stayed by his side the entire time, watching over him without asking for anything in return. And once Arthur was finally full recovered, the only thing on his mind was getting back home, but Sylvia quickly shut that idea down. According to her, there's no way Arthur would make it on his own. The cave they're in is right on the edge of Elshire Forest, and that part of the forest is crawling with dangerous magical beasts, and the kind of bandits that make the ones who attacked his family look like amateurs, so if he tries to leave now, he's not going to make it. But that doesn't mean he's stuck here forever, because Sylvia explains that she has the ability to create a dimensional rift, something that could teleport Arthur to a safer location, maybe even all the way home. But the problem was it would take her a long time to generate it, so until that portal's ready, he's got no choice but to wait. With nothing else to do, Arthur grabs a stick and starts swinging it around. If he's stuck here anyway, might as well get in some sword training. Days pass, and although he still doesn't know much about Sylvia, he's grown to enjoy her company. All he really knows is that she looks like a terrifying monster, and she's clearly hiding from something or someone, but despite everything, she's one of the kindest people he's ever met. After another round of training, Arthur takes a break. He walks over to a flat rock, sits down, and starts working on channeling his mana. Sylvia watched for a while, quietly impressed. He was just a kid, yet he already had a mana core, but from the way he was going about it, it was obvious he hadn't received proper training. Without a word, Sylvia lifts her hand, and suddenly, a swirling mass of mana gathers in her palm. Arthur's jaw nearly hits the floor, because it's not just that she's casting a spell, it's the fact that she's gathering mana while she's casting. So if you can learn to control mana like that, there's no doubt you become incredibly powerful. But before he could ask her to teach him, Sylvia stopped and looked over at him. She wanted to know what he planned to do with that kind of power if he learned it. Arthur hadn't really thought about it before, but now that she brings it up, one memory burns in his head. Those bandits. How close they came to killing his family. How powerless he felt. So without thinking, he tells her flat out, he'll use that power to wipe out anyone who dares to hurt the people he loves. Sylvia didn't like what she heard, and without a word, she walked over and flicked Arthur on the forehead, knocking him back and tells him straight that she'd never teach that technique to someone driven by thoughts like that. Arthur sat there, holding his head, still not understanding what the problem was, because to hit him after what happened to his family, wanting to protect them by any means, felt right. Sylvia wants to make something clear, so she gently presses a single finger against Arthur's forehead, and calmly tells him she could just as easily crush his skull with it or touch him with care like she just did. Then she asks him which one he'd rather experience. Obviously, Arthur chose the gentle touch. So, she explained that anger and hatred are easy paths to walk, but once you start down that road, it never ends. It just consumes everything. She didn't want that for him, and she didn't want him to waste his life chasing revenge, so she asked again what will he do with this power. Arthur took a moment, and this time, instead of thinking about the fear and violence he faced, he pictured the faces of the people he loved, the ones who made him smile. And with that image in his heart, he answered that he wanted strength so he could protect them. So Sylvia smiled because that was the answer she'd been hoping for. But elsewhere outside the cave, another creature was drawing near, one that looked an awful lot like Sylvia. It had been tracking her, and now it was close. Back in his old world, Arthur had been a king, but not in the way most people imagine. His senators held the real power, and he was just their weapon. A pawn used to wage wars and silence enemies, and that life had left him hollow because he hated being used like that. Back in the present, Sylvia was helping him shape a different future. She began teaching him her technique, showing him how to draw an ambient mana and condense it. Arthur followed along, and after a few tries he managed to pull in the mana and use it to boost his body. The power was incredible, he could feel it pulsing through him. He ran to Sylvia, full of excitement, ready to thank her. But then everything shifted, and Sylvia's eyes narrowed because she sensed something. And without even a damn warning, she shoved Arthur into a pile of rocks and whispers for him to stay hidden and quiet. Arthur peeked through the cracks and spotted another creature approaching, a massive beast, almost identical to Sylvia. Sylvia clearly knew him, and from the way she tensed up, Arthur could tell this wasn't a friendly visit. The stranger didn't waste time and demanded Sylvia come with him, but she refused, so without another word, the other beast launches an attack. Arthur wanted to jump in, but he suddenly heard Sylvia's voice in his head. She told him to stay back, and she would handle this. The other dragon tried to reason with her one last time, said he didn't want to kill her, but what if he had to? But Sylvia's answer was clear, she would rather die on her feet than listening to his freaking voice. She then unleashed her full power, and in that moment, Arthur saw her true form, a dragon pulsing with energy. And in this form, she can unleash everything she's got. Sylvia then launches a massive blast straight at the other creature. He manages to block it, but tells her she's being reckless because if her body is in this condition, using that much power will kill her. Sylvia already knows that, but she just doesn't care because she's lived a long life and has no regrets. Then with one strong push, she slams the other monster into the wall. But he's not down for good, and he gets right back up and starts hammering her with a barrage of magical blasts. She takes the hits hard, but right now, she's more concerned about Arthur. This battle is getting way close to the place she stashed him. The enemy then fires off one last heavy shot, and she can't dodge it without risking Arthur's life. So, she draws on every last drop of power, and freezes time itself. While everything is frozen, she tells Arthur to come out from hiding, and he listens. It looks safe enough, but he's full of questions, especially after seeing that she's actually a dragon. Still, there's no time for answers because her time freeze spell is running out fast, and she needs to move him now. She opens the dimensional rift she had been building, but since she's injured and never got the chance to finish the spell properly, the portal connects to some random place instead of his home. She really didn't want to dump him in the forest, but at this point, there's no other choice. Even so, she trusts Arthur. With what he's learned from her, she believes he can handle himself and make it back on his own. But before she sends him off, she asks him again what he plans to do with its power. Arthur doesn't even pause and tells her that he'll use it to protect the people he loves. That answer puts her at ease, and she's glad he finally understands. Before he goes, there's one last thing she wants to give him. Sylvia conjures an egg and a single feather, placing them gently in front of him. She asks him to wrap the egg in the feather, and keep it safe no matter what. Then, with the last of her strength, she transfers her will onto Arthur's body, marking both of his arms with strange, glowing symbols. Arthur looked down, stunned by the sudden appearance of the glowing marks because they stretched from his shoulders to his wrists like full-sleeve tattoos pulsing faintly with mana. But Sylvia doesn't have the energy to explain what they mean, and she simply tells him that one day, he'll understand how to use them. But by then, she won't be around to show him how. Sylvia also apologizes to Arthur, because the truth is, she could have sent him back to his family the moment he showed up, but she was just enjoying his company so much that she didn't want to let him go. And now, because of that selfish choice, she ended up putting him in danger. Arthur feels awful because he knows there's nothing he can do to save Sylvia from dying here even after everything she taught him. He doesn't care that she's a dragon or a monster or whatever else people might call her because he sees her as family. He tells her she feels like a mom to him, but Sylvia gently reminds him that he already has one. So Arthur smiles and says she can be his grandma instead. Sylvia didn't see that coming, but the moment he says it, her heart melts, so she asks him to say it again. And he does happily. Sylvia's heart breaks knowing she won't get to see him again, but time is running out, so she gently nudges him forward toward the portal. Arthur gets it, so he picks up the gift she gave him and walks toward the rift, but at the last second, he turns around and tries to coax her into coming with him. Sylvia doesn't budge because she can't, so she shuts the portal and sends him away. Time then unfreezes and the enemy's blast slams straight into her. The hit looks devastating and Sylvia crashes to the ground, but the other monster isn't convinced she's dead. He knows she's way too powerful to go down from just that. He steps in closer, lowering his guard. But it's a big mistake because as soon as he's in range, Sylvia summons everything she's got left and lets out one last attack. The blast wipes him out, along with everything around him for a full mile. As Arthur gets pulled through the dimensional rift, he hears Sylvia's voice one last time. She asks if he remembers what she said about how power should be used, and Arthur does. But his heart is heavy, so Sylvia tells him the world's a sad place, and stuff like this is going to happen. But that's exactly why he needs to change it. Arthur protests because there's no way he could ever pull that off, but Sylvia isn't expecting him to change the world overnight. One step at a time, that's all it takes. Besides, this isn't his first time shaping a world, and she knows who he used to be. Sylvia is aware of his past life as a king, and while she didn't agree with how he ruled back then, she believes that as long as he doesn't lose himself to hate, Arthur can become the kind of king this world actually needs. Then a little while later Arthur wakes up on the ground dazed and aching, but one thought is burned into his soul: he's going to keep his promise to her. But first he's got to figure out how to get out of this damn forest. But suddenly, he hears something move behind him. Arthur hears a blood-curdling scream echoing from across the woods, and it sounds like a little girl, so without hesitation he channels mana into his legs and bolts toward the noise. He leaps up into a tall tree for a better view, and from there he spots a group of bandits dragging a young elf girl. She tried to escape, but they already got her, and one of them has his hand clamped over her mouth to shut her up. And since she's an elf, they're planning to sell her on the black market for a huge profit once they leave the forest. So they tie her up and toss her into the back of their carriage like cargo. Watching all this shit, Arthur is hit with flashbacks, memories of the moment he and his family were attacked by bandits too. He remembers hearing those bastards talking about keeping him and the women alive to sell later, and it makes his blood boil. His first instinct is to slaughter every last one of them for what they're doing, but then Sylvia's voice echoes in his mind, reminding him to keep his anger in check. He closes his eyes, takes a breath, and regains his focus. Charging in now could get the girl killed, and he knows it, so he holds back, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Once the bandits all pile into their carriage and start heading out of the forest, Arthur silently follows, sticking to the shadows. By the time night falls, they stop to set up camp since it's too dark to keep going. Arthur sits nearby, hidden, still debating whether he should trail them until they reach a town or just take them out here. But then he overhears one of the scumbags talking about how elves are his favorite, and how they should get a taste of her before selling her off. That's it, Arthur knows he can't let this go on. But it's not quite time yet because he still needs full cover of darkness before making a move, so he closes his eyes and starts meditating, getting himself ready for all the blood he's about to spill. Once it's dark enough, Arthur opens his eyes, fully focused, and starts mapping out his plan. It then spots a few horned wolves chained up nearby, which is strange because no way wild beasts like that would obey humans willingly. A closer look reveals they've been forced into submission with enchanted collars, and Arthur figures he can use that to his benefit. So, he picks up a few acorns and tosses them at the wolves to stir them up. The wolves' howling draws the bandits' attention, and their leader growls at one of his men to hurry over and shut those freaking beasts up. The unlucky bandit drags himself up and heads over, kicking one of the wolves hard in the neck to silence it. But in that exact moment of distraction, Arthur makes his move. He summons a mana of blade, leaps down silently behind the bandit, and in a swift brutal strike, cuts the man down where he stands. Arthur quickly grabs the guy's weapon, and just as another bandit comes over to check out the noise, Arthur jumps onto his back and slits his throat clean. That makes 2 down, but Arthur's body is already running low on steam, so he knows he can't drag this out for long. Then another bandit shows up to see what's taking so long, and Arthur rushes him, trying to land a clean kill. But he misses the vital spots, and the guy manages to scream, blowing Arthur's cover. The leader catches on fast and realizes the attacker is a mage kid, which means this fight just got a hell of a lot more complicated. Still, he doesn't want to kill the kid, not when selling a young mage on the black market would be worth way more than the elf girl. He starts channeling magic into his arms and charges in swinging. Arthur leaps back and throws a kick to counter, but the guy dodges it with ease. Arthur tries to throw him off by hurling his knife, but the leader catches it midair and turns this move against him. He slams Arthur to the ground and grabs him by the ankles, lifting him up just to mock him. He laughs, telling Arthur there's no way a kid can beat an adult in raw strength. And Arthur knows he's right, so he stops trying to match power with power, and he switches back to magic. He blasts a fireball straight at the guy's knee, and while he's screaming in pain, Arthur drives the knife straight into his skull. Only one more to deal with the wounded bandit from before, and Arthur wastes no time finishing him off. Then he heads straight for the carriage to check on the girl. She's still blindfolded, completely in the dark about what just happened. Arthur gently tells her it's okay now, the bandits are gone, and she's safe. Her name is Tesha, and as Arthur helps her out of the carriage, he tells her she's free to go home. But then Tesha spots the blood on Arthur's hands and immediately starts panicking. Arthur figures it's normal, any kid would freak out after seeing that much blood. Letting her see the full aftermath might not be a great idea, so he tells Tesha to wait right there for a bit, then walks off to cover all the bodies before she sees them. Tesha then asks Arthur what happened to the ones who took her, and Arthur doesn't really want to tell her he slew them, so he just says they ran into a bit of an accident, and won't be a problem anymore. The girl doesn't press any further, so Arthur grabs her things from the bandit's carriage, hands them over, and says goodbye because he still needs to make his way home. But before he can walk off, Tesha grabs his arm and begs him not to leave. She's terrified of being alone out here, scared she'll be eaten by some tree ghost or worse. Arthur asks if she at least knows the way home, and she says she does, kind of. She knows the general direction, but not how long it'll take to get there. Arthur really doesn't want to go off course, but he also knows there's no way Tesha survives out here on her own. So, in the end, he agrees to walk her back to her village. He glances over at the wolves the bandits were keeping and considers using them to speed things up, but he's got no clue how to actually control a wild wolf, so he figures they're better off left behind. Tesha, though, says they should at least take off the magic collars so the wolves can go free. Arthur warns her that taking them off could get her attacked, but Tesha isn't too worried. She hasn't hurt them, and as someone who lives in this forest, she feels responsible for helping the creatures that live in it. She ends up removing the collars, and sure enough, the wolves quietly walk off into the woods without causing any trouble. By the next day, Arthur and Tesha are already on the move, heading toward the direction of her village. After walking for a while, they stop to take a quick break and grab a bite to eat. Arthur cooks up a simple stew and tells her she's gotta eat, because they still have a long way to go, and she'll need the energy. Tesha makes a face because the stew tastes and smells kind of weird. But hey, Arthur is no gourmet chef. The whole thing is just dried meat and salt boiled together. Not exactly 5-star, but it's better than starving. While they eat, Tesha asks why Arthur came to El's higher forest in the first place. It's not every day a human, especially a kid, shows up around here. Arthur explains how he got separated from his family and ended up wandering into the forest. Since they're already on the subject, he asks what it's like living in the kingdom of Eli Noir, and Tesha lights up. She says she loves it. Her parents are always busy with work, so she usually spends most of her time hanging out with her grandfather and the family's servant. They keep moving along the path, but since Tesha has no clue how far her village actually is, it's tough to say how long this trip's going to take. And to make things worse, one of those wolves she let go earlier has been quietly trailing them ever since. Arthur is seriously starting to regret not just taking them all out back when he had the chance. That night, Arthur decides to stay outside the tent and keep watch. If that wolf shows up, he wants to be ready in case it tries anything. But a little while later, Tesha peeks her head out and asks Arthur to come inside and sleep. He tells her he's not tired and he'll stand guard out here. She's clearly too freaked out to be left alone. She begs him to come inside with her, and after a little back and forth, Arthur finally gives in. He figures he can still keep watch from inside the tent anyway, just to help her feel safer. Tesh is trying to act like she isn't scared, but it's obvious, especially since she insists that Arthur stay right next to her the entire time, even when they're taking their shit. Before she falls asleep, Tesha asks him something random about the human kingdom. She wants to know if it's true that all humans are perverts who marry a bunch of wives. Arthur's caught off guard and asks where she even heard that shit, and she says it was her grandpa who told her. Arthur admits some nobles have their own harem, but most humans are actually pretty decent. Tesha seems satisfied with that answer and turns over to go to sleep. Luckily, the wolf never showed up that night, so by morning, Arthur and Tesha packed up and got moving again. Over the past few days, Tesha's really started to open up to Arthur. And now that the trauma of the slave traders is fading, she actually seems happier. Still, she's totally useless in the wild. She can't even cross a small creek without help, so Arthur ends up having to carry her across like a sack of flour. Then out of nowhere, Arthur clutches his chest in pain. It hits him like a wave, and he has no idea what's happening. Tesha freaks out and runs off into the woods to find some herbs that might help, but Arthur's pretty sure this isn't some random sickness. He props himself up against the tree, barely holding it together, and that's when the same wolf from before shows up. Arthur immediately tenses up. If it attacks now, he's completely screwed. Just as things start to look bad, Tesha comes running back with the herbs and Arthur warns her to keep her distance in case the wolf lashes out. But instead of attacking, the wolf casually walks up and drops a dead pig right in front of him, then turns around and walks away. Arthur just stares, totally thrown off. Tesha guesses that maybe the wolf was just trying to say thanks for letting it go free. That evening, Arthur and Tesha set up camp and sit down to enjoy some roasted meat by the fire. It's a major upgrade from the bland stew they had earlier, so Tesha's loving it. While she was out searching for herbs earlier, she also found a few mushrooms. She offers some to Arthur, but in hindsight, he really shouldn't have eaten the random forest mushrooms because now he's dealing with the worst case of diarrhea imaginable. After Arthur's done practically dying in the woods, he's exhausted and ready to crash on the spot, but Tesha keeps talking to him. She starts going on about how her grandfather used to read her storybooks about the human and dwarven kingdoms. Ever since then, she's wanted to visit them, but the elders never let her because elves generally don't trust other races. Somewhere in the middle of her story, Tesha realizes Arthur isn't listening at all. He's clearly too white to focus, so she gently covers him with a blanket and quietly wishes him goodnight. And by the next day, they get back on the road, but Arthur's chest pain is getting worse with every step. Tesha feels bad for not being able to do anything to help, but Arthur tells her it's nothing to worry about. Trying to change the mood, Tesha asks if she can start calling him Art since they've spent so much time together, and she sees him as a close friend now. Arthur says he's cool with it, and Tesha's caught off guard by how chill he is, so he plays it up a little, joking that he'll forever treasure the fact that the great Lady Tesha now considers him a friend. That annoys her a bit, and she tells him to stop acting like a brat. Arthur fires back saying it's rich coming from someone who wouldn't let him leave her side all night because she was scared. Tesha insists that was completely different. Still, joking aside, Arthur realizes something. Tesha's actually the first real friend he's ever had. Not just in this world, but even in his past life, he never had anyone get this close. Just then, Tesha spots something up ahead that looks familiar. She calls Arthur over to take a look. He walks over expecting her to show him a cool stick or some weird rock, but instead he finds himself standing in front of a massive tree, with a glowing portal embedded right in the trunk. Tesha turns to him, says this is the entrance to her village, and reaches out her hand, asking Arthur to come with her inside.